Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Call of Duty DFS Esports Breakdown for July 16th. Getting this one out pretty late, but better late than never, I suppose. Quick little three gamer here. Pretty interesting stuff. Obviously, Call of Duty has been going pretty interesting lately. Nearly every series is going 3-2, which makes it kind of interesting because then it comes down to just individual players and kill shares and that kind of stuff as opposed to what team is expected to do better. Obviously, it's a lot easier to uh, perform better when your team's winning and you're in the advantageous positions, but that's just kind of how things break down. So, quickly to recap yesterday's slate, all four games went to Game 5. Big standouts obviously were the FaZe side, who ended up barely getting the squeak out win over FaZe or over Paris. They did pretty well on the Bocage, which set them up pretty well. RCT's Celium and Abizi were the impact makers there. LAG ended up beating London. A little bit of a surprise to me. I really liked London coming into the event, and they completely let us down. Seattle, although Boston won, Seattle definitely outperformed them. Came heavily through the Bocage. Pred is just an absolute animal, and that was the difference maker on the entire slate. I faded 60 something percent own Pred, and it obviously came back to backfire. And then Optic Texas ended up beating out Minnesota Rocker. Dashi still seems like seemingly alone in the server by himself for Optic, so not looking great for them. But pretty interesting. The entirety of the event is looking pretty interesting. So let's talk about it. The first series up is Optic Texas versus Boston Breach. I'm honestly a little surprised to see Optic such a big favorite after just one series win over Minnesota, in which they did not even look that convincing. So obviously, Optic did end up winning the series. However, it was done through two Search and Destroy wins, and it was a squeaky Gavutu win over Minnesota. Picks and bans will be extremely important here because I could definitely see it going two different ways. Um, I, I think Optic will start go ahead and banning the Bocage. Um, sorry, This is a that was a confusing perspective there. Um, they just have not been looking good on the Bocage as of late. So it's something to keep in mind. I definitely would check for picks and bans beforehand. Obviously, this is the first series of the day, so we will have that information out in advance. So that's something to keep in mind and something to keep a lookout for. If the Bocage is in the series, I'm looking to go very, very heavy on Boston. If there's no Bocage, I'm still going to have a good bit of Boston. I still think that they make this series close. I think maybe Optic win it in 5. However, I think they get out Slate again. I just have not seen much from them in these respawn game modes as of late to inspire much confidence. I think Boston is getting pretty underrated here. I think Optic is getting pretty overrated here. I'm very, very surprised to see Optic minus 220 in this series. I think maybe if we look at the map breakdown, it's going to be a little bit different. Like, as we could see, the Optic is very slightly favored in the respawns, but Optic is a pretty big favorite in the search and destroys. I think that's a somewhat fair assessment. However, I just do not think the respawn game modes are that telling or that intriguing. Like, if we look at this little match stretch of games from Optic, like they have wins. They have a slight win over Minnesota where they didn't even look great, and their other win is over Paris. They just have not looked great outside of the search and destroy. Obviously, they're 6-3 in it, but their controls are 1-5. They got completely blown out by Paris in the control as well. Boston have been picking it up and playing control very well. They're 5-2 in the game mode, so I'm looking to go pretty heavy on Boston, especially. We talk about it all the time, but we're specifically looking at these respawn game modes for DFS and how much they impact the DraftKings scoring that you want from your players. And I think that's definitely an avenue I'm looking to explore and go pretty heavily on. I will look at the map set, and that will determine how much Boston I have, kind of allocated here. I could definitely. I think the problem is Boston don't have, or Boston will not have their two hardpoint maps. Optic will either ban Berlin or Bocage. They got blown out again yesterday on Bocage, so I could definitely see them looking to go ahead and try to avoid that map. And just kind of be done with the Bocage experiment. They're 2-4 on it. They've played it a fair few times, and they've yet to have much success on it. Um, so for that reason, I could see them kind of throwing in the towel and saying, kind of, we're done with this Bocage mess. Let's try to get to our other maps. Give it a chance. But it's not like the other maps are that great either. The the interesting thing here is kind of where the maps are, because I think each team has a pretty solid map. Obviously, Boston have Berlin and Bocage, and I think Optic would be definitely favored on the Gavutu and the Tuscan. Um, the slight caveat there is I would much favor the Boston side in this scenario, because although they've yet to play the Tuscan, which is definitely concerning, Optic are not playing it either. There's 0-1 on it. It's not, I do think Optic would be objectively better on the Tuscan than Boston. However, it's not like they play it either. So we have a scenario where of what I think will play out. I think Optic will go ahead and ban the Berlin. That's just something that they've been more inclined to do throughout the season. Like, I don't think that they're, I don't know. It's hard to tell. I don't know whether they're going to adapt and change it based on their form or what they're going to do. I think Optic will most likely go ahead and ban the Berlin. Um, Boston will pick Bocage, and then I think Boston should go ahead and ban the Gavutu, and then it leaves us on the Tuscan, where the only thing is Optic are 0-1, Boston are 0-0 on it. Neither team are looking neither team play it, so maybe there's a lot more unknown there. However, I think we have one good map for Boston, one unknown, maybe slightly better for Optic Texas map there on the Tuscan. And again, I think that leaves us with a very, very solid map set of Bocage Tuscan, which is the best possible map set, by the way, and one where I'd definitely be looking to go pretty heavily on the Boston side and look to try to lock and load the players again, that we've been trying to target for the past little bit here, of Narrow, Vivid, and TJ Halley. Specifically, TJ Halley is a cheap option. He's at 6'6". Narrow's like super expensive at 10.2, and Vivid's at 7.6. Obviously, I think you could look to the Optic Texas side as well. However, I would kind of just limit it to Dashy. He is super underpriced. I will, kind of give that caveat out. If you're making an all-value team, Shotzi would probably be your captain. He looks like an extremely underpriced player here at 8.6, considering his production and how much he is needed to do well for the team. I definitely think if the Bocage does come out, there is enough options in fantasy scoring that you could look to go ahead and try and play both sides of this. I think if you were to do a Bocage stack here with Narrow, Dashy, and Vivid, that probably would not even be that bad. I think that would definitely make some sense, and you could definitely get a good amount of raw potential scoring from that scenario, because of how the other series are shaping up. So that's something to keep an eye out. I will try to tweet something out. If not, I'm not sure. But, as usual, keep up to date. Check in 15, 20, 30 minutes before lock or so. And keep an eye out for the map set. I believe the Twitter account that usually puts it out is at CDL Scrimtel. They usually have the information of the maps that are going to be out beforehand, and it typically is only the first series that we're able to see that for. But I think this is a pretty good series to get the pre-lock info on, and again, if it is the dream map set of Bocage Tuscan, I'm going very heavy on Boston. If there's Bocage at all in the series, I'm going pretty heavy on Boston. I think they've looked much better on the map. If there's a more neutral map set where it's something like Berlin Gavutu, which I think is still definitely in the realm of possibilities, where I think maybe Boston want to go ahead and ban the Tuscan, Optic go ahead and ban the Bocage, and then we get the Berlin Gavutu, which I think is a relatively neutral map set. Just because Boston are much favored on the Berlin, Optic are much favored on the Gavutu. In that scenario, I'd probably lower my Boston exposure a little bit, but I would probably still keep some Boston in, because I think they do have a good bit of upside. So overall, yeah, leaning towards the Boston side. I could definitely see this being another one of those types of series like we saw yesterday, where Optic maybe win it in 5, and they steal one of those, steal one of the respawn game modes, win both of the search and destroys, and win the series. And even in that scenario, I think they could get a little bit outslayed. So it's definitely something I'm looking at here, and I'm slightly leaning towards the Boston side. Again, I'm pretty surprised the odds are the way they are. Up next is Toronto versus LA Thieves. So obviously, right off the bat, we have an LA Thieves series, which means no Bocage right off the bat. That is their permaban. That is definitely pretty tough for Toronto because, I guess it helps them in the chance of winning because it's not, or sorry, in the, yeah, it is. It helps their chances of winning because it's not like they are particularly great on it either way. I think this map set is actually pretty decent and a pretty decent spot for Toronto. Um, I don't know. This series is definitely very interesting. I could definitely see, arguments kind of for both ways and both sides here. Um, the thing is, like, I just have not seen. We've just seen such wildly inconsistent things from both teams. My slight lean is towards Toronto just because we've seen more players step up for Toronto. I feel like when we look over on the LA Thieves side, granted, we've seen Envoy step up yesterday. Like we saw Envoy play really well yesterday, and so that kind of maybe puts a little bit of a dent in kind of what I'm saying here. But um, when we look at the Toronto side, I feel like we've seen a solid series from Bance, Insight, Cammy, Kleenex. Like we've seen upside, we've seen good play from these guys at different times. From the LA Thieves side, although we've seen a spike series here and there from Kenny and Envoy, it's been a very heavily centralized on Octane and Draza and needing them to perform well. I just feel like there's more avenues and more outs to victory for the Toronto side. The map set I think is pretty decent for them. I think they'll go ahead and ban the Gavutu, which is the LA Thieves best map. LA Thieves will go ahead and ban Bocage, which is not that great for the Toronto side, so it's not like they're losing that much. And we go ahead and get the Berlin Tuscan. Both teams are 2-1 on Berlin. LA Thieves are 2-3 on Tuscan. Toronto is 2-2 on Tuscan, so pretty even map set overall. I definitely think you could look at going either way. Both teams are 4-2 on control. The difference maker obviously is going to be that the search and destroys. LA Thieves have been performing much better in the search and destroys. And all this was said with the fact that they got completely dominated by FaZe in 2 search and destroys. So if you were to like remove the FaZe series, they're 6-1 in search and destroy. They've been playing much better lately. It's definitely something to keep in mind. I do like the Toronto team slot pretty cheap at 2,400. I do think it's going to be competitive search and destroys, and that helps your DK team slot a lot more, than like a dominant win, for example, because you just want to try and get the bomb plants and diffuses farmed up. I think that's a very optimal idea, is to try to play the search and destroys that are close for your team slot. I think this could be pretty close, maybe slightly lean towards the LA Thieves, but if it were to go in the Toronto fashion, that would be a spot I'd like. I think players are open, or they're fine on both sides. You could definitely make a good case to look at somebody like Octane. He's at 8.4, very affordable. You could get inside at 8.2. Draws at 7K. Like, there's a lot of options you could definitely look at in this series. They're pretty cheap on both sides. However, again, my slight lean would be slightly towards the Toronto side. I just like their players. I like their upside a little bit more. I'm not in love with LA Thieves and, Kenny and Envoy specifically. It just feels like they've played pretty well, or they have not been playing pretty well. Granted, they did beat FaZe, and as much as, as great as that sounds, we just know FaZe have not been the same as of late. It's tough. I could definitely see it going either way. I definitely understand why the odds are the way they are, slightly lean towards the LA Thieves. We've seen ups and downs from kind of both of these squads. I don't know. I guess, I don't know. Kind of looking at the match histories here, it definitely feels like it definitely should be a little bit more looking towards the Thieves. That's just weird because I feel like, if I look at the match history here, if we say LA Thieves, The losses are a 5-game series to FaZe and a 5-game series to Florida, but they beat New York, FaZe, Paris, Boston. That's decent. Toronto's beat London, Optic, and LAG. Like London, all three of these teams are eliminated out of the tournament. They've lost to Boston, Atlanta, London. Like it's not great from Toronto. So, and then the other thing as well is the hard points. Obviously, we looked at the map set. It is relatively close. However, the players, I think the kill death ratio is a little bit better. The condensed kill share, like the Octane is going to get, maybe Draza as well. Like I think that definitely helps their case. Like if we were to look at let's look at player map stats specifically for like LA Thieves, Berlin. So LA Thieves, the last 3 Berlins. Let's take a look. Octane, Berlin, 28-22, 29-22, 25-18. Those are very impressive numbers for Octane on Berlin. Envoy, 19-18, 20-28, 23-32. Not very good from Envoy. Kenny, 27-22, 22-26, and 27-31. So not very good from Kenny either. And then Draza would be the last one in. 18, 19, 18, 21, 23, 25. So not decent from him either. But I guess, considering he is 7K, that's definitely fine. And then the other one would be the Tuscan, which I assume will come out. So if we're to look at Tuscan for Draza, 25-17, 17-27, 21-24. Not great from him. Envoy, 34-20, pretty big map, pretty big defeat there, and 22-24 from him there. Not great. Octane, 21-21, 26-23, 22-24. Pretty okay numbers. I think you'd be fine with that. You don't love that. Do we look at Draza already? Yeah, not the best from Draza either. Envoy. Yep, he had that big map, and that's it. And then Kenny. Kenny's actually been playing Tuscan pretty decently. So 22-21, 25-24. What was his Berlin like again? He had one good... Kenny maybe he's not the worst shout here. Those maps do seem like he's been playing a little bit better on. So maybe that's something to keep an eye on. Maybe you could get a little bit different that way and try to do like an Octane Kenny instead of an Octane Draza, because I do think that is going to be the more popular build. The big difference comes in the controls, as we could see Draza is much better in the controls. He's at a 1.12. Kenny's at a 1.06. So that's the way it's going to go. I'm going to do the rare thing here and look to pivot away from kind of what I was just talking about. I just feel like those numbers that we just looked at and everything that we kind of just gathered, it feels like it's kind of gearing up towards the LA Thieves. It feels like low key this could be like a pretty solid event for LA Thieves. After all the turbulence that they've had so far through the year, there's no like standout dominant team right now. Like maybe you could argue that New York has been playing very well. There are cases for these teams, but granted, it feels kind of out in the open right now for a lot of teams. So maybe this could be the LA Thieves time, and I do think that they've been kind of peaking at the right time, so to speak. So I'm going to plant my hat on the LA Thieves side. I like Octane. I have kind of a feeling there with Kenny. I wonder how he played yesterday. Let's take a look at that. So I guess it was just their one series. Yeah, he was actually kind of the second performer there. So that was the same map set as well. Tuscan Berlin. He did really well in the SND, so that's kind of the difference maker. But it's something to keep in mind as well. So it looks like you could go a lot of different ways with the LA Thieves side. I think it would probably just kind of be all of them except for Envoy for me, and that'll be my look at for the LA Thieves side. So that'll be it from me on that one, and then we can go ahead and move over to New York versus Florida. So. Final series of the day, pretty interesting one here as well. Bocage Watch is pretty intriguing here. We'll take a look at that and get an idea on it. I know both of these teams are willing to play it. Whether they do that or not is I'm unsure. It's pretty intriguing. I would think off the bat, I would definitely think Florida's going ahead and go ahead and ban the Berlin. They're 1-4 on it. New York are 4-0 on it. It's one of their two maps that they ban pretty consistently, being the Berlin and the Tuscan. So I think off the bat, Florida will go ahead and ban Berlin. In terms of what New York will go ahead and counter ban with, I'm not sure. That one's kind of up in the air. Maybe they go ahead and ban the Gavutu or the Tuscan. Obviously, we could see that both teams don't ban the Bocage. They both have two Bocage bans all year, which is an astonishingly low number. So I guess Bocage pretty likely here. Gavutu and Tuscan looks like are the New York bans typically. I don't know which direction they would go. That will make a difference actually, but because as we talk about all the time, we talk about Gavutu being very bad for DraftKings scoring and Tuscan being like the second best option for DraftKings scoring. So the difference does matter. However, it's very hard to predict. They're both 1-0 on Gavutu. New York is 3-1 on Tuscan. Florida's 3-2 on Tuscan. So that's pretty close overall. In terms of what direction I'm leaning, I definitely am just going ahead and leaning towards the New York side. Although New York, again, have not been playing that well on land this year. I just do think that they're the much better team. The slight kind of caveat or concern here is I just have a very bad read on Florida. It just feels like I've never gotten them right at all. And it's very tough to guess where they are and kind of get a feeling on it. I did talk about when they played online that they needed Skies to play better, and he did. He is their LAN player. He's been playing very well for them on LAN all year. That's something obviously I talked about on the Twitter thread I made, talking about comparing players from online to LAN. Skies has been one of the best LAN players of the year so far, and that definitely helps them a good bit. So if we look back at their series they had against Boston, I think yesterday or the day before, so Skies is one of their better players. They have a decent performance from Awakening and Major Maniac. The difference here, again, is Too Real, and he's been playing pretty poorly, just kind of straight up. They don't expect much from him. He is, kind of the rookie player they brought in to try and spark something. He has not been able to do so. It is a very tough situation for him. And I just think they're going up against a team that's a little bit too, big for them, so to speak. And I just think overall the New York side just have better players. We've seen a lot more from the New York side, specifically like Hydra and Paul X, a little bit of sprinkle of Kismet. Crimsix we know is the kind of the vocal leader, veteran presence that they have. So it's not like he's expected to perform numbers wise. He's more of a team asset in that sense. So I like New York again. Not a very hot take there. So we are overall looking at the slate, a slight favorite of New York, a slight favorite of LA Thieves, and a slight underdog there of Boston. It's a decently sized underdog at plus 160 of Boston. So pretty intriguing one. I'm pretty excited for this one. Obviously, Bocage Watch, I think we'll have the info on Optic Boston map set, so definitely keep an eye out for that. Check 15 minutes before lock on that info. Bocage Watch in the second series, 0% chance pretty much. LA Thieves do not play that map. I would not expect that to happen. However, I'm still willing to take a look at some of the LA Thieves players. They are pretty cheap. The kill share is relatively condensed, I think, on Octane and Draws, although we've seen Kenny start to pick it up as well. And obviously Envoy had a very strong series yesterday. So I'm willing to go to the LA Thieves side for that reason. And then I'm going to finish pairing it out with the New York side, who is pretty underpriced. They're going to be extremely popular, I think, at this price. Hydra Paul, specifically at 9 and 8K. What is with this pricing? Why is Awakening and Skies averaging 11, and why is Kismet 11? That's interesting. And then even on the first series, again, we talked about that. You could look to triple stack this up. I think if we do have a Bocage Tuscan first series, I think you could get away with playing Nero, Vivid, and Dashy all in the same lineup. Just with how much fantasy points can be scored in that scenario. But if we were to look again at the full-fledged map series for New York, Florida will ban Berlin. New York will either ban Gavutu and Tuscan, and then I think we get a Bocage picked by New York. and then Florida will go ahead and either get the Gavutu or the Tuscan. I don't know what direction they would go. It's really hard to tell. That feels like a complete toss-up. I wonder. I guess they played at the start of the season, or the start of the kind of time here. So I wonder if anything will change from that. We'll go scroll down. It was the very first match of stage 4. So we actually had the Tuscan Berlin. So yeah, I do not think Florida will allow the Berlin again. They lost by 100 points on this one. They're 1-4 on it now. I definitely do not expect that to happen again. Yeah, that will not be happening again. The Tuscan did slightly go in their favor, so maybe New York will look to ban that out, or maybe they think they could get a better performance on this one. I'm not sure, but I do not expect this to happen again. I do not think Florida will allow that. Will allow the Berlin to happen again. So I do expect Florida to go ahead and ban Berlin instead of the Bocage. And I think New York will go ahead and look to get either the Gavutu or the Tuscan, and we will have a Bocage and either Gavutu or a Bocage and a Tuscan. And that is a pretty wildly different map set. That's either the best and worst map or the best and the second best map. So that's a pretty big gap in terms of expectations. So I'm going to vary my New York exposures. I'm going to have a good bit. I do think, again, the upside and potential that they have pretty good map set is there. But if they do end up on the Bocage Gavutu, like if there's a hypothetical scenario where Texas and Boston, if that series has Bocage Tuscan, if Toronto LA Thieves that goes as planned, and then New York Florida have like a Gavutu Bocage, then obviously the Texas Boston series is going to have the best map set by a good margin. And I definitely think that's one where you could see that kind of slight game stack pan out a little bit better. And maybe you want your exposures down a little bit on the Thieves and the subliner side. So that's something to keep in mind. We'll look at the players, quickly get out of here, but I think we have a pretty good idea of where they are, already. But we'll look at it either way. So obviously we'll go ahead and look at Boston, New York, and LA Thieves. Obviously, Hydra numbers, very good. Octane numbers, very good. Draws is up there as well. Polex, Kismet, maybe you can make an argument for methods. Obviously, we talked about Kenny being a little bit better. I do like Vivid, although his numbers are not the best here. I wish you could look at engagements in this player stats thing, but we know Vivid is a hyper engaged player. For sure, so that's something to keep in mind. I guess one real quick thing we'll look at before we get out of here is I want to look at Boston's how the Boston players have been playing on Bocage as of late. That's something that I'm intrigued on. So obviously they're 3-1 on Bocage. They just got beat down by Seattle pretty decently. So their last 4 Bocages is when they've been playing with this exact lineup, and that's something I want to get a refresher on. So TJ Halley, last 4 Bocages, 2 bad performances, 2 okay performances. I think you're willing to take that at 6.6K if you do need the cheapness there. Nero, 1.5, 1.3. These are very solid numbers. I definitely lock and load a lot of Nero in that scenario. Vivid, kind of up and down. He had 1 very strong performance against Seattle, 3 pretty mediocre performances. So that's a kind of a tough sell. Then Methods is just kind of getting destroyed on the map overall. I would not go in that direction at all. So yeah, that'll go ahead and be it from me tonight. Hopefully you guys can get some use of this video. Kind of ran a little bit longer than I wanted, but it is what it is. So that'll be it from me today. I will see you guys. I think this will probably be the last COD video for a while. I don't think there's any more slates that'll be coming up. So I'll see you guys when I see you guys, and best of luck to you guys.